Hi, everyone. Great to have you here with us. Our panel today will focus on content production in the Middle East, particularly in the GCC and Saudi Arabia. And we will explore questions around how we can make this content attractive on the global stage, okay? And what we would need in that regard across the ecosystem, be it policies, regulations, investments, cross-border collaborations. And we're lucky today here to have, three leaders and pioneers of the film and the content production landscape in the Middle East. So I'll start the first question with you, Ben. This is something top on mind for everyone. We've seen content produced in certain countries that have exploded on the global stage. So if we look at South Korea, for example, we had Squid Games. In Spain, you have Casa de Papel, very, very localized productions that were created and succeeded on a global stage. And the question arises, in the Arab world, we haven't really seen this yet. So what do you think are the strategies, or the tactics that content producers can do to craft narratives, Arab narratives that would resonate on a global scale?
That's a good question. I don't know if I've had enough coffee to answer that one. No, I'm kidding. First, I don't know if I fully agree with you that it hasn't happened. I would argue that at least the closest that it's been is Al Rawabi School for Girls that Netflix did.
Yes.
Because that did travel quite well.
Yes.
But for me, I think what happens is the region has developed in a way which revolves around Ramadan. And things tend just to get rushed. So for me, the thing that everyone needs to do the best is to take their time. A lot of times things are reverse engineered based on a release date, which I understand in the economics of Ramadan, and I get that. But it's the thing that I see often is that things are just rushed. So I would advise, take your time. It's better to do it next year well than to do it this year not well.
Okay. And do you think are there particular stories or narratives or themes that are specific to the Arab world that can resonate? Maybe not on a global scale, but also similar to other cultures.
I mean, I think a universal story is a universal story, and different cultures dictate different ways of telling the same story.
Yes.
What in the examples that you give, what usually happens is the local audience is really drawn to it, and then it's the popularity from the local audience that makes it go global. So you have to be genuine to your audience, and if you're not, because here's another thing that does happen, and I think my fellow panelists would agree. There are producers who try to make things with the idea of trying to get them to travel. I think that's a terrible mistake.
Yeah.
Make it for your local audience, and if you do it right by your local audience, then it can travel.
So keep your local audience in mind,
Yeah.
top of mind, focus on them.
And be sincere to them. Be sincere to their culture. Be sincere to their dialect. Be sincere to how they dress.
Yes, because I totally agree with you, because I think if you just try to make it appeal to everyone, you will appeal to no one at the end of the day.
Exactly.
And you would risk alienating or not getting the right attention at the local stage, let alone the global stage.
And the world's such a small place right now that the global audience will know if the local audience hasn't responded. And then they won't bother watching it no matter what it is.
Okay, good, thank you. Hannah, another interesting question to you. Again, also we've seen content being distributed and disseminated differently these days. On one hand, the age of linear TV and cinema blockbusters is fastly and rapidly moving towards OTTs. We're having more short form content that's being created, short series, that go on YouTube, that go on, different social media platforms. So, in your position today, in your content productions, to what extent are you trying to steer or think of content that would resonate on these platforms, or different, these formats that are more fit for the young generation, be it on social media or OTT platforms?
Well, we mainly concentrate on Shahid, to be honest, as a platform. But of course, I mean, social media is very, very important right now. And it's part of, you actually, whenever you have a show, you will know the success with the interaction through the social media. So it's like a measurement for any success that you will get. And of course, you will think of this even not only in marketing, even in the content creating. And this what makes it affects content, definitely. And it guides us sometimes with what shows we make and the audience, and it's making us more aware of our audience and where we need to actually create more content. This has been very helpful in terms of social media. But of course, in terms of, if we want to talk about Saudi right now, we have, of course, the cinema, and the box office is very important right now. Again, we are still exploring because it's not clear. It's a young market, so we don't know exactly what will make a box office hit and what will not. So we are experimenting, even with content in Saudi right now, with Shahid again. We are exploring different types of genres, sometimes whether it's a short form or a mini series or longer forms. And with every single experiment, we are learning more about the needs of our audience.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure at NBC Studios you are putting into place the systems and to measure and analyze
Yes.
Audience data, preferences, etc., and getting real-time feedback. And we're seeing that into a lot of our clients, a lot of our media clients, content producers, distributors, OTTs are coming to us and asking us, how can we create the right systems and data analytics practices in place to make sure that we're getting real-time feeds, real-time inputs that we can analyze, and these create a very fast feedback loop that we can adapt and improve our content and improve the targetability and the personalization of our content.
Yeah.
Thank you, Hannah.
Thank you.
Hussein, it's good to see you here. Hussein, another important element that we're seeing in content production, as you know, we have very big media hubs in the region being formed, particularly in Saudi. We have Neom, we have Al Ula, we have, Riyadh is also doing something. Qatar, Qatar Media, and all of these players, Abu Dhabi, etc. So all of these hubs are very keen on stimulating proper content production and even attracting global blockbusters to the region. So how do you see the collaboration happening between the government entities and the government support and private sector players are yourself, covering areas such as policies, regulations, incentives, and what have you?
I'll answer that question, but if we have time, I'd like to go back and address some of the points that Ben made later.
Sure, please.
So in terms of government versus private support, if we ever want to see a step change in this industry, the private sector has to come in at some stage. Otherwise, we're never going to see the growth that we should. The incentives and the rebates are great, and obviously Abu Dhabi have been the sort of pioneers in that respect in the Gulf region, and they help stimulate. But there needs to be more to bring in the private sector to kind of motivate them and entice them. And in order to do that, we need to show that there's a return on investment for this industry, right? I mean,
definitely.
Money's being thrown at tech, money has always been thrown at real estate. That's not the case with our industry. It's always a struggle because they haven't seen commercial viability for what we do, right? So I think the government needs to stimulate that first. So instead of doing a 200 million real fund, let's say, for content. They should do a 100 million real fund and then bring in the other 100 million from the private sector and say, listen, your capital is guaranteed, for example, or you get first money out, or whatever it may be, to entice them. So that's where I see the future of sort of the public-private connection.
And I think we're seeing it. We've seen some funds being created today in Saudi that have, a government or a kind of a public entity contribution, as well as doing some fundraising from the private sector. But like you said, this takes time to materialize, for the returns to show. But as soon as, hopefully, we see these returns, you will get a hockey stick effect in terms of, private sector attraction, growth of the industry, etc. Also, back to the point that I wanted to also discuss with you. If we look at your content productions, etc., to what extent do you try to focus on, in terms of narratives, in terms of local traditions? Okay, also similar to the point that we discussed with Ben, trying to take local traditions in the narratives that you build versus, modernity. Because we've seen, even the pace of advancement in the region and the cultural and societal change that's happening. Do you see this being reflected in narratives? And for example, if you look at some of the big blockbusters, like some of the attractive shows that we saw recently on Netflix, for example, I'm just coming to mind like Dubai Bling or whatever. These try to, edge more towards the modernity. So how do you see that happening?
Well, look, it's obviously working for them, right? I mean, Dubai Bling works for Dubai Bling. It wouldn't be my choice, but it's not a subjective view, right? But I think that's I don't see that as a challenge. It's easy. You have to be authentic, right? You don't need to please anybody. And as Ben said earlier, it's not about making content because we wanted to travel or we wanted to resonate in a certain market. We have to be authentic to ourselves. We have a treasure trove of IP and stories in this part of the world. We're storytellers. It's in our DNA, right? If we tell it authentically, we tell it properly, we do it with the right production value, the right writing, the right development, and you tick all the boxes, then by default, it's going to do well and it will have the ability to travel. So I don't see that as a challenge. And you're saying, sort of modernity and so on. India is a great example. India they do awesome content, they have a huge industry. They don't get involved in nudity or things that are against their culture. It's exactly the same thing for us. We can tell our stories in a way that is representative of our culture.
And this will resonate on the global stage as well, similar to how India and others did it.
But if I may, to this point though, in fairness, there is quite a bit of hesitation to really tell those stories the proper way. Let's be honest about it. Like, once we kind of take those straps off, I think we're good to go. And we're getting there. And I think all three of us can say that we move our toes further and further with every project. But, once that gets there, I think it'll explode. Right now, it's just not. There is some bit of editorial things that happen, when we're making things. But I think as the regulations loosen on all of us, the content will travel more.
Okay. Another question that comes to mind, if we look, with the advent of AI now and Gen AI, this will definitely revolutionize the way content is produced, okay? And it will also impact the wider ecosystem in the sense that some of the production and post-production, etc., can happen more virtually, for example, and this will affect also, investments in sound stages, infrastructure, etc. I would like to ask all of you: did you start feeling the impact of these technologies on the way, content is being produced in this part of the world? Or
I'll go. I don't think, honestly, it's as close as everybody thinks. I think that certain things are going to be really helped by AI, but I don't think that the practicality of production is really in danger for the next at least 15 to 20 years. Okay. And I say this having seen, and I'm sure you guys have seen it as well, all the AI stuff that's going on. I mean, it all comes to us all the time for investment or collaboration or things like that. And all the US studios have, deep AI programs, and all of them, I mean, if you watch how they behave, they're all buying studios and they're all building studios. So if they thought it was going out the door, they wouldn't be doing it. But everybody's still doubling down on sound stages and studio space. So until you watch the bigger player, if you see the bigger players stopping doing that, that's the time to kind of reconsider. But we're not in danger of that in the near future, in my opinion.
Okay.
I agree 100%. Sorry, please go ahead. Please.
No, it's just even in terms of content, production side, Ben is absolutely right. But also in terms of content, it's helpful. You can use it as a tool to help you, but it will never generate, a content that is never ever authentic, as we would say, never.
Okay.
So we're lucky in terms of using these tools, I think, in order to help us, but it will never replace a writer or any creative in the industry.
Okay.
100%. I mean, they're exactly that. They're power tools, right? If I was a carpenter and you give me a big shiny box of sharp saws, that's what it is. It's power tools. We're going to be able to do things faster. We're going to be able to do things in more volume, maybe a little bit better, but it's not going to take away from the fundamental production requirements. And I don't think it's going to replace jobs. I mean, maybe you're being a little bit generous. I'd say in the next 10 years, but it's not happening in the immediate future.
Okay.
And also, one of the big misconceptions about these AI videos that we all see and get forwarded to us on TikTok or Instagram, when you view them, a lot of people make the mistake of thinking that this was instant and it was free. Neither is true. I mean, you see the 5-minute animation video on TikTok and people think, oh, this is fantastic. And then you look down in the comments and the creator says, oh, this took me 5,000 hours to do. So there's a lot of work hours that go into this, and that means a lot of computer time, and that means money. Will it be cheaper? Absolutely. But is it instant? No. I mean, it's going to be a long transition.
Yes, and also, like you said, you're focusing on authentic narratives. At the moment, it's difficult to see how AI can create authentic narratives, particularly if you want to contextualize them to the region or to the market that you're trying to target. Okay, my last point, I'm not sure who of you is comfortable to discuss this, but we've seen anime from Japan getting some sort of traction in the region. What can you tell us about this? And do you see this as a sustainable trend or just a fleeting, passing thing?
Okay,
Anyone?
Sure, I'll go. I mean, from my understanding, and I didn't grow up in the region, but from my understanding, coming from the people that I work with who did grow up mostly in Abu Dhabi, when they were kids, they grew up with anime. I didn't grow up with anime. I grew up with different kinds of like Saturday morning cartoons and Scooby-Doo and things like that. But here they really grew up with anime. So I think as people got older and they pass it down to their kids, that's why anime is having such a big boom, because it's so much easier to export. I think it's going to be there a while, and I think there's going to be, some kind of fusion between, anime style animation and kind of traditional style animation. And I mean, in the region, that's going to happen. I mean, we have a project that's an animation film called Cats Away, which is a bit of a fusion between the two visually.
Okay.
So I think that it's a natural occurrence that's going to happen.
True. I mean, anime is older than, in the regions, older than one generation. So it's not a trend. I don't think so. I think it has its own audience here, and there are lots of ways to explore with this, but it is appealing to the Saudi. I would talk about the Saudi audience at least.
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely. Okay, great. Thank you. Anything say, Hassan?
I
before?
just wanted to go back to Ben's earlier point we talked about. You had mentioned about this. We're at a tipping point now, right? We saw what happened to Korean content after Squid Game, and as you said, after Money Heist with Spanish content, and we see the data. There was a huge demand on the sort of back end of that. Although Rawabi obviously done very well, and it's probably the most successful Arabic content show that we've had, I don't think we've quite reached that tipping point
Yes.
yet. We need something that's a bit more breakthrough than Rawabi. And I know the race is on now across the region to do that, so to be the first. But just on that point, and the second point about Ramadan, I mean, this is just such a, and with the greatest respect, we've had Ramadan for the last 1400 years. We know it comes every year. And yet 6 months beforehand, we get a call to say, we need to do a Ramadan campaign. Like, we need to get out of that cycle.
Yes.
Number one, and we need to get out of the cycle of the 30 episode sort of thing as well, right? I mean, consumption habits are changing. So, that's going to help also elevate and contribute to Arabic content. So I just wanted to make those points.
And in building on that, in an odd way, I mean, we have found, and I'm guessing you guys have found this too, that the standards for Western content and local content are entirely different to the local audience. Like they'll let a lot of things slide in Western movies or Western content. Things that may not be authentic, suspension of disbelief, things like that. But when it comes to local content, they are much less forgiving. Like they're drilled down on their traditions and drilled down on the literalness of what they see.
Yeah.
And it's something that we collectively have to try to get people over, because they expect Ramadan. Like, you're right, like, it's a great quote. We've had Ramadan for 1400 years. We know it's coming. Like, and the same way the audience is expecting the same thing. And even when you try to break that cycle, they don't necessarily support it. They'll support it with Western content, but then they go, well, why isn't your show 30 episodes? Why is it 12? And you're like, but you watch this other show that's 12 episodes and you're fine with it. And they're like, oh, but that's English. So it is, we have to retrain the audiences to be able to watch it this way.
I think there's one thing to add here is that platforms changed the game a little bit. We have now series that are 15 episodes, some of them 8, 10, which is a great form to do a really solid story, and not like the 30 episodes and done in a special way just to fit in Ramadan. I think gradually things will change because platforms will take over. It's the TV. It's the heritage of the TV, I think. So it is changing. It's taking a while, but this is where we see much more interesting stories to watch as a Saudi, as an Arabic content. To be honest, we've seen few interesting, very successful mini-series, Arabic, just because it is just 10 episodes or 8 or 6. So more is coming, and I think we will have a different talk after a few years about Arabic content.
Definitely. So a lot of exciting things happening, things moving, as we mentioned, on the narratives, on changing formats, on adapting to platforms, on the government and private sector collaboration. So thanks a lot for being with us today. A lot of interesting insights here. I just want to see if anyone from the audience has questions.
Sorry to bring you down from the stage. Riyad Najm from Shasha World. I want to ask the panelists, do you think that to make the Arabic content global, or globalize the Arabic content, is it really the role or the duty of the private sector or the government institution, or probably both? But to which extent, who should take this initiative?
If I may, I think it's always safer and more authentic for the private sector to take that initiative, because you're always going to have that sort of, is it part of a soft power play? Is there an agenda here? So I think it should be driven from the private sector with the support of the government, obviously. And censorship is already there, so you're going to have that control regardless. But I think the private sector will make it more creative, make it more commercial, make it more competitive. That's my 2 cents worth.
I agree. I mean, it's both. I think the private sector has to do it, and the government has to let them.